to your rules. I know my rights, and you can't tell me what to do.
Ma'am, I'm Officer Meacham with Denver Airport Police. Is there something I can help with here?
Please. Unbelievable.
I do not consent to your statutory jurisdiction, Brittany Duggar shouted, thrusting a laminated card toward the bewildered TSA agent. I am a private attorney general conducting urgent judicial business under Article 4 travel rights. Officer Sean Meacham heard the commotion 3 screening lanes over and immediately recognized the telltale language of a sovereign citizen confrontation. He sighed quietly, adjusted his body camera, and approached with measured steps, already knowing this would not end quickly or easily. The morning rush at Denver International Airport's Terminal East security checkpoint had been proceeding normally until now, with hundreds of travelers shuffling through the standard rituals of modern air travel. TSA Agent Ramirez stood with his hand extended, repeatedly asking for identification and a boarding pass, while the blonde woman in front of him grew increasingly agitated with each request. Behind her, a young boy of about 9 sat cross-legged on the floor, headphones on and eyes glued to a tablet, seemingly oblivious to the growing tension around him. The line of passengers behind them had already begun to back up, with travelers craning their necks to see what was causing the delay. Before we continue, don't forget to like and subscribe, and let us know where you are watching from. Officer Meacham activated his body camera with a double tap before stepping into the situation, positioning himself at a professional distance from the increasingly loud confrontation. "Ma'am, I'm Officer Meacham with Denver Airport Police. Is there something I can help with here?" he asked, maintaining a neutral tone developed over 12 years of airport law enforcement. The woman swiveled toward him, already recording with her smartphone held at arm's length, her face flushed with indignation beneath carefully styled blonde hair. "Good. Another witness to this unlawful detention and harassment," she declared loudly, now playing to both her phone camera and the gathering crowd of delayed travelers. Agent Ramirez looked relieved at Meacham's arrival and quickly explained the situation. "Sir, this passenger is attempting to enter the secure area without proper identification or a boarding pass," he said, his voice professionally even, despite the obvious frustration. Officer Meacham nodded acknowledgement while maintaining situational awareness of both the increasingly agitated woman and the growing line of frustrated travelers. Brittany Duggar thrust a laminated card toward Officer Meacham's face, close enough that he had to lean back slightly to focus on the elaborate gold seal and flowing script that proclaimed Certificate of Universal Travel Immunity in ornate lettering. "I don't need their corporate permissions or adhesion contracts," she announced loudly. "I'm traveling, not engaging in regulated commerce, and I have immunity as a private attorney general conducting urgent judicial business under the supreme authority of common law." Officer Meacham recognized the document immediately as the type sold for hundreds of dollars on sovereign citizen websites, completely worthless in any legal context, but dangerous in its ability to convince vulnerable people they were exempt from laws. "Ma'am, I understand you believe this document has legal significance, but federal regulations require all passengers to present valid government-issued identification and a boarding pass to access the secure areas of an airport," he explained patiently. Brittany scoffed dramatically, turning to ensure her phone camera captured her expression of disdain. "That's a corporate policy, not law, and it doesn't apply to me as a free inhabitant exercising my unalienable right to travel," she countered, her voice rising with each word. "Do you even know what Article 4 of the Articles of Confederation says about freedom of movement between the several states?" The growing line of travelers began to show visible signs of frustration, with checking watches, sighs, and whispered conversations spreading through the queue like ripples on water. Ma'am, the Articles of Confederation were replaced by the Constitution in 1789, Officer Meacham replied calmly, and federal regulations under 49 CFR 1540.15 require all persons seeking to enter secured areas of airports to present valid identification and submit to screening. Brittany's expression shifted between triumph and rage, as though she'd been waiting for someone to mention a specific regulation. Ah, so you admit these are mere regulations, not laws passed by Congress, and therefore they're color of law violations, she declared, her voice echoing through the checkpoint area. I'm making a record of your name and badge number for the federal lawsuit I'll be filing under Title 18 U.S.C. 242 for deprivation of rights under color of law. Several of the waiting passengers had begun taking out their own phones to record the increasingly theatrical confrontation, creating exactly the audience Duggar seemed to crave. "Ma'am, I'd be happy to provide my name and badge number," Officer Meacham responded, pointing to the clearly visible identification on his uniform. "But I need to ask if you have a valid government ID and boarding pass for travel today." The question seemed to further agitate Duggar, who dramatically retrieved a leather portfolio from her large purse and began flipping through pages of documents with gold seals and red thumbprints in the corners. "I have something better than your corporate identity tracking cards," she announced, pulling out another laminated document. "I have my Declaration of Political Status and Sovereign Identity, authenticated by 2 witnesses and notarized under the Universal Commercial Code." Officer Meacham maintained his professional demeanor despite recognizing more sovereign citizen pseudo-legal language and completely fictional documents. "Ma'am, those documents aren't recognized by the TSA or any federal agency as valid identification for air travel," he explained, using the same patient tone he'd developed during his years handling similar situations. Brittany's face contorted with fresh indignation as she turned to the growing audience of travelers, seeming to play to them now. "Do you all hear this?" she asked theatrically, sweeping her arm toward the line. "They're denying my right to travel freely as guaranteed by the Supreme Court in Thompson v. Smith 1930, which clearly states that the right of a citizen to travel upon public highways includes air travel by common right." The young boy sitting on the floor looked up briefly at his mother's raised voice, then returned his attention to his tablet game, a practiced response that suggested this wasn't his first experience with such confrontations. "Ma'am, commercial air travel is regulated by federal law, and no court has ever ruled that there's a right to fly without identification," Officer Meacham explained, keeping his voice level despite the growing tension. Duggar's response was to thrust another document toward him, this one bearing a large red stamp reading, "Notice of Trespass Against Rights," across the top. "I'm serving you with this notice of trespass against my constitutional rights, which carries a fee schedule of $10,000 per minute, payable in silver coin as required by the Constitution, Article 1, Section 10, she declared, attempting to push the paper into Officer Meacham's hands. Officer Meacham didn't accept the document, but noted the attempt to serve papers in his mental log of the incident, a common sovereign citizen tactic he'd encountered before. "Ma'am, I'm not accepting any documents from you at this time," he said calmly, "but I do need to inform you that you're currently blocking a federal security checkpoint, which is causing delays for other travelers." The checkpoint had indeed ground to a near halt, with TSA officers opening only a small channel for passengers to walk around the confrontation to other screening lanes. "I am not blocking anything," Brittany retorted, her voice rising again. "I am attempting to exercise my right to travel and being unlawfully detained. You are the one causing delays by refusing to recognize my sovereign status and immunity." The situation had reached an impasse that Officer Meacham had experienced many times before. The person was deeply committed to a fundamentally flawed understanding of law that no amount of explanation could penetrate. "Ma'am, you have 3 options at this point," he explained with practiced calm. You can provide valid government-issued identification and a boarding pass as required by federal regulations. You can leave the security checkpoint area, or you will be subject to removal and possible arrest for interfering with security operations. Brittany's response was immediate and predictable to the experienced officer. "I do not consent," she practically shouted, holding her phone higher to ensure it captured the interaction. "I do not consent to your corporate policies. I am not engaged in commerce or admiralty jurisdiction. I am a living woman exercising my God-given, unalienable rights." Officer Meacham noticed airport operations staff approaching from behind the checkpoint, recognizing the telltale signs that this incident was beginning to affect flight operations. "Ma'am, are you refusing to either provide identification or leave the checkpoint area?" he asked, making sure his body camera would clearly record her response. Brittany's eyes narrowed as she pointed dramatically at her son, still sitting on the floor with his tablet. "Look what you're doing to my child," she exclaimed, though the boy hadn't looked up or shown any reaction. "You're traumatizing him with your corporate tyranny and color-of-law violations." Officer Meacham noted that the child appeared completely unperturbed, suggesting he was accustomed to these situations. "Ma'am, I'm concerned about your son as well, which is why I'm hoping we can resolve this situation peacefully and quickly," he replied, maintaining his professional tone. The checkpoint area had become a theater in the round, with Brittany Duggar at center stage performing for her phone camera, while delayed travelers formed an unwilling audience to the unfolding drama. "I need a supervisor right now," Brittany demanded, her voice pitched to carry through the terminal. "I'm being unlawfully detained by agents of a corporate entity masquerading as government." Officer Meacham noted the familiar escalation pattern he'd seen countless times in sovereign citizen encounters, where each reasonable request was met with increasingly dramatic claims and demands. TSA agent Ramirez had already radioed for his supervisor while maintaining his position, his face a mask of professional neutrality despite the growing spectacle. "Ma'am, I understand you'd like to speak with a supervisor, and one is on the way," Officer Meacham said, maintaining a calm, measured tone. "While we're waiting, could you please tell me what your travel plans are today?" The question was a tactical one, designed to potentially gather useful information while appearing conversational. "That's private information, protected by the Fourth Amendment," Brittany snapped, swiveling her phone to capture more of the surrounding area. "I'm not required to disclose my private affairs to agents of a de facto corporate government." The response told Officer Meacham what he suspected. She likely had no actual travel plans or boarding pass and had come to the airport specifically to create this confrontation. Brittany suddenly crouched down next to her son, placing her arm around him while continuing to film, the performance now incorporating the child as a prop. "Jacob, these men are trying to prevent Mommy from exercising her constitutional rights," she said loudly, though the boy barely looked up from his game. "They don't want us to be able to travel freely, as guaranteed by the Supreme Court." Officer Meacham recognized the tactic immediately, using the child to create emotional leverage and more dramatic content for her video. "Ma'am, I'm concerned that this situation is becoming disruptive to your son and to the hundreds of travelers trying to make their flights," he said, gesturing discreetly toward the growing backup at the checkpoint. TSA Supervisor Marcus Campbell arrived at the checkpoint, his experienced eyes quickly assessing the situation before introducing himself. "Good morning, I'm Supervisor Campbell. How can I help resolve this situation?" he asked, positioning himself near Officer Meacham, but not crowding the already tense interaction. Brittany immediately redirected her performance toward the new authority figure, thrusting her Certificate of Universal Travel Immunity toward him. "Your agents are violating my right to travel freely between the states, as guaranteed by the Articles of Confederation, which were never properly repealed," she declared. "I demand safe passage as a private attorney general conducting judicial business under the authority of the original constitutional jurisdiction." Marcus Campbell had clearly encountered sovereign citizens before, his expression remaining neutral as he listened to the familiar pseudo-legal jargon. "Ma'am, I understand you have concerns about identification requirements, but I need to inform you that federal regulations require all passengers to present valid government ID and a boarding pass to access the secure area," he explained patiently. "If you're having issues with your documentation, we'd be happy to have Officer Meacham escort you to the ticket counter where the airline might be able to assist you." Brittany's response was immediate and forceful. "I'm not a passenger, I'm a traveler," she insisted, as if the change in terminology altered the legal reality. "I'm not engaging in commerce or entering into any adhesion contracts with corporate entities." The checkpoint lines continued to grow as the standoff persisted, with at least 50 travelers now delayed and watching the scene with a mixture of curiosity and frustration. "Ma'am, regardless of the terminology you prefer, anyone entering the secure area of the airport must comply with TSA requirements," Officer Meacham explained, noting that airport operations staff were now actively redirecting passengers to other checkpoints. "At this point, you're creating a security disruption by refusing either to comply with identification requirements or to leave the checkpoint area." Brittany's expression shifted to one of theatrical victimhood as she turned to address her audience of delayed travelers. "Do you all see this oppression?" she called out. "This is what happens when you don't know your rights. They want us all to submit to unconstitutional demands." Officer Meacham noticed several passengers rolling their eyes or shaking their heads, clearly unsympathetic to Duggar's performance. "Ma'am, no one is oppressing you," he said firmly but professionally. "You're being asked to comply with the same security requirements as everyone else traveling today." Brittany's response was to retrieve another document from her leather portfolio, this one bearing a large seal with an eagle. "I have here my diplomatic immunity verification under the Vienna Convention, which exempts me from your corporate policies and procedures," she announced, holding it up for her camera. "As a sovereign citizen and private attorney general, I have the same immunity as any foreign diplomat." The document was clearly a purchased novelty item printed on heavy paper with gold foil accents, but bearing no authentic government markings or valid legal language. "Ma'am, that is not a recognized diplomatic credential," Supervisor Campbell stated plainly, his patience visibly wearing thin as the disruption continued to affect operations. "You have 3 options. Present valid government ID and a boarding pass, leave the checkpoint area, or be subject to removal for interfering with security screening operations." Brittany's face flushed with anger as she thrust her phone closer to Campbell's face. "I'm recording your threats and violations of my civil rights," she declared. "You're all going to be personally liable for damages under Title 42 U.S.C. 1983. Officer Meacham had quietly radioed for additional officers, recognizing that the situation was approaching the point where removal might become necessary. "Ma'am, no one is threatening you," he clarified for the record. "We're simply explaining the requirements for accessing the secure area of the airport and the consequences of refusing to comply with lawful directions." Brittany's theatrical performance intensified, her voice rising to ensure maximum coverage in her recording. "These are not lawful directions. They are corporate policies being enforced under color of law," she insisted. "I do not stand under your admiralty jurisdiction as indicated by the gold fringe on your flag." The reference to gold fringe flags, a common sovereign citizen belief that courtrooms with gold fringe flags indicate admiralty jurisdiction rather than common law, was particularly nonsensical in an airport security checkpoint with no flags present. "Ma'am, there are no flags with fringe in this area," Officer Meacham pointed out calmly, "and TSA screening requirements are established by federal law, specifically the Aviation and Transportation Security Act." Brittany seemed momentarily thrown by the factual observation about the lack of flags, but quickly pivoted to a new argument. "The corporate United States government has been bankrupt since 1933 when it abandoned the gold standard," she declared. pulling out a tattered photocopy of what appeared to be an old financial document. All agencies since then are merely debt collectors for the Federal Reserve. By this point, several additional airport police officers had arrived and positioned themselves discreetly around the perimeter of the scene, ready to assist if the situation required physical intervention. "Ma'am, these historical economic policies have no bearing on current security regulations at airports," Officer Meacham explained, maintaining his calm professionalism despite the increasingly bizarre claims. "I need to ask you one more time. Will you either provide valid identification and a boarding pass, or leave the security checkpoint?" Brittany's response was to crouch down next to her son again, who continued playing his game with headphones on, seemingly detached from the chaos his mother was creating. "Jacob, these officers are trying to violate our constitutional rights to travel," she said loudly, clearly performing for her camera rather than actually communicating with the child. "They think we're subject to their corporate policies just because we're in an airport." Officer Meacham exchanged a glance with Supervisor Campbell, both recognizing the problematic use of the child in this confrontation. "Ma'am, I'm concerned that your son is being placed in a difficult situation," Officer Meacham said gently. "Would you consider stepping aside with me to resolve this issue while Supervisor Campbell stays with your son?" The suggestion triggered an immediate and dramatic response from Brittany. "You are not separating me from my child," she shouted, placing her arm protectively around the boy, who finally looked up, seeming confused by the sudden contact. "That's a direct violation of my parental rights under natural law." Officer Meacham raised his hand slightly in a calming gesture, recognizing he'd touched on a sensitive point. "No one is trying to separate you from your son," he clarified. "I'm simply suggesting a way to resolve this situation with less stress for everyone involved, including him." Brittany used this exchange to further escalate her performance, turning to address the now substantial audience of delayed travelers. "They're threatening to take my child," she declared loudly, though Officer Meacham had suggested nothing of the sort. "This is how tyranny works. They use your children as leverage." Several travelers audibly sighed or muttered comments, clearly recognizing the manipulation at play. "Ma'am, that is absolutely not what Officer Meacham suggested," Supervisor Campbell interjected firmly. "But you are causing a significant disruption to airport operations, and this situation needs to be resolved." The young boy, Jacob, finally seemed to notice the tension surrounding him, removing one headphone and looking up at his mother with a mixture of confusion and what appeared to be embarrassment. "Mom, can we just go?" he asked quietly, his voice barely audible amid the commotion. "I'm hungry." The simple, childlike request cut through the theatrical performance, momentarily revealing the real impact of the situation on the child. "We're not going anywhere until they recognize my rights," Brittany responded sharply, before quickly softening her tone and adding, "Mommy's fighting for our freedom, honey." Officer Meacham saw the opportunity in the child's request and approached the situation from a different angle. "Ma'am, there's a food court just outside the security checkpoint where you and your son could get something to eat while we sort this out," he suggested reasonably. "I'd be happy to escort you there, and we can continue our conversation in a more comfortable environment." The offer was both a genuine attempt to de-escalate and a tactical move to remove the disruption from the security checkpoint. "That's just a trick to get me to abandon my rights claim," Brittany responded suspiciously. "Once I leave, you'll claim I voluntarily exited and consented to your jurisdiction." The checkpoint had now been effectively disrupted for 20 minutes, with TSA staff working to redirect passengers to other security lines while maintaining proper screening procedures. "Ma'am, your continued refusal to either comply with security requirements or leave the checkpoint is affecting hundreds of travelers," Officer Meacham explained, gesturing to the growing crowd. "At this point, you're interfering with the secure operation of the airport, which is a violation of both federal regulations and state law." Brittany's response was to pull out her phone's notepad app and begin typing dramatically. I'm documenting your name, badge number, and threats for the federal lawsuit, she announced loudly. Each violation of my rights carries statutory damages of $100,000 per occurrence. The situation at Denver International Airport's East Terminal security checkpoint had descended into a standoff that was now affecting airport operations beyond just the immediate area. Airport Operations Manager Michelle Bennett arrived on scene, conferring briefly with Supervisor Campbell while assessing the growing impact of the disruption. "We've got 3 departing flights holding at the gate because passengers can't get through security," she informed Officer Meacham quietly. "FAA is asking for a timeline on resolution." Officer Meacham nodded his understanding of the escalating stakes while maintaining his focus on Brittany Duggar, who continued filming her confrontation while periodically referencing her son as evidence of government oppression. "Ma'am, I need to inform you that your actions are now delaying actual flights from departing," Officer Meacham explained, hoping the concrete impact might penetrate where legal explanations had failed. "There are hundreds of travelers being affected by this situation, including families with children who may miss connections or important events." Brittany seemed unmoved by this information, perhaps even pleased by the growing impact of her performance. "That's not my responsibility," she declared, pointing accusingly at the officers. "You're the ones refusing to recognize my immunity and right to travel. You could end this by simply respecting the Constitution and allowing me free passage." Officer Meacham decided to try another approach, focusing on practical solutions rather than engaging with the pseudo-legal arguments. "Ms. Duggar, if you have actual travel plans today, I'd be happy to escort you to the airline ticket counter where they can help verify your reservation and possibly assist with identification issues," he offered reasonably. "Many airlines have procedures for passengers who've forgotten or lost their ID." The use of her actual name seemed to momentarily surprise Brittany, who narrowed her eyes suspiciously. "How do you know my name? I never provided that information," she demanded, though Officer Meacham had simply recalled it from the incident report he'd received when responding. "Your name was provided in the initial call about this disturbance," Officer Meacham explained truthfully, though without elaborating on the security protocols that had likely identified her from previous incidents. "So, do you have an actual flight you're trying to catch today?" Brittany hesitated slightly, the direct question momentarily disrupting her rehearsed script. "My travel plans are private and protected by the Fourth Amendment," she finally responded, effectively confirming Officer Meacham's suspicion that she had no actual flight reservation and had come to the airport specifically to create this confrontation. The young boy, Jacob, had begun to show signs of genuine distress, shifting uncomfortably on the floor and glancing anxiously at the growing number of uniformed personnel around them. "Mom, I really want to go now," he said, his voice small but audible in a momentary lull in his mother's performance. "I don't feel good." Officer Meacham noted the child's discomfort with concern, recognizing that the situation was taking a toll on the innocent bystander most directly affected by Duggar's choices. "Ms. Duggar, your son seems uncomfortable with this situation," he observed gently. "Perhaps for his sake, we could move to a quieter area to resolve this?" Brittany's response was immediate and theatrical, crouching down to embrace her son while ensuring her camera captured the moment. "Do you see what they're doing to you?" she asked him loudly. "They're trying to use you to make Mommy abandon her rights." The boy looked confused and increasingly upset, clearly not understanding why he was being used as a prop in his mother's performance. "I have to document this emotional abuse for the record," Brittany announced, standing up and panning her camera around to capture the officers. "You're deliberately causing my child distress to force me to comply with your unlawful demands." Officer Meacham exchanged glances with Supervisor Campbell, both recognizing the manipulation at play, but also genuinely concerned for the child's welfare. "Ms. Duggar, no one is trying to cause distress to your son," Officer Meacham stated, clearly for his body camera record. In fact, we're trying to find a resolution that minimizes the impact on him and everyone else affected by this situation. Brittany responded by pulling out another document from her leather portfolio, this one with the heading, Notice of Liability for Child Endangerment, in bold red letters. I'm serving you with this notice that you're liable for $1 million in damages for the emotional distress you're causing my son, she declared, attempting to thrust the paper into Officer Meacham's hands. As with the previous documents, Officer Meacham declined to accept the paper, maintaining his professional distance while focusing on resolution. Ms. Duggar, I'm not accepting any documents from you at this time, he stated calmly. What I need is for you to make a decision. Will you either provide valid identification and a boarding pass as required by federal regulations, or will you leave the security checkpoint area? The clear binary choice seemed to frustrate Brittany, who was clearly seeking to maintain the confrontation rather than reach any resolution. Those are not the only options, she insisted. You're creating a false choice paradigm. I have the right to travel without your corporate permission. Airport Operations Manager Michelle Bennett approached Officer Meacham again, her expression conveying the increasing urgency of the situation. We now have 5 flights holding, with over 800 passengers affected, she informed him quietly. The FAA is requesting immediate resolution, or they'll begin implementing ground delays for the entire terminal. The stakes had risen significantly, with the disruption now potentially affecting air traffic beyond Denver International Airport. Ms. Duggar, this situation has escalated to the point where it's affecting national air traffic, Officer Meacham explained, his tone more serious. I need to inform you that if you continue to refuse lawful directions, you will be subject to arrest for interfering with security operations. The mention of potential arrest seemed to be exactly what Brittany had been waiting for, her expression shifting to one of triumph rather than concern. Threats, intimidation, coercion, she exclaimed loudly, making sure her camera captured her reaction. I've got it all on video now. This is exactly the violation of rights I came to document. The statement effectively confirmed what Officer Meacham had suspected, that the entire confrontation had been deliberately staged to create content for sovereign citizen social media channels. So you're acknowledging that you came here specifically to create this disruption? He asked, wanting to clarify her admission for the record. Realizing her tactical error, Brittany quickly backpedaled. I came here to exercise my right to travel and to document the systematic violations of constitutional rights that occur every day in these corporate checkpoints, she declared, avoiding a direct answer. I'm a journalist and private attorney general conducting an investigation into TSA overreach. Officer Meacham noted the additional claim of being a journalist, another common sovereign citizen tactic to claim special protections. Ms. Duggar, disrupting security operations is not protected journalistic activity, he explained patiently, and there is no such legal status as a private attorney general under U.S. federal law. The situation had reached a critical decision point, with airport operations significantly impacted and the child showing increasing signs of distress. Ms. Duggar, this is your final opportunity to either comply with security requirements or voluntarily leave the checkpoint, Officer Meacham stated firmly but professionally. If you do neither, you will be placed under arrest for interference with security screening operations under Colorado Revised Statutes 18-9-117. Brittany's response was to thrust her phone even closer to Officer Meacham's face, nearly touching his uniform. I do not consent to your threats. I demand to speak to the airport director and the FBI immediately, she shouted. I'm being subjected to terrorist tactics by agents of a corporation masquerading as government. Officer Meacham had maintained remarkable patience throughout the confrontation, but the direct invasion of his personal space crossed a line of professional conduct. Ma'am, please step back and lower your voice, he requested firmly. You're now physically interfering with an officer, which is a separate violation. Instead of complying, Brittany seemed to interpret the request as weakness, pressing even closer with her camera while continuing her tirade. "I have the right to record public officials. You're violating my First Amendment rights by attempting to restrict my freedom of the press," she declared, though no one had suggested she couldn't record, only that she needed to maintain appropriate distance. The young boy, Jacob, had now curled into a ball on the floor, covering his ears as his mother's voice reached increasingly strident levels. "Mom, please stop yelling," he pleaded quietly, his distress evident to everyone in the vicinity. "I want to go home." Officer Meacham noted the child's increasing anxiety with growing concern, recognizing that the situation was becoming traumatic for the innocent bystander most directly affected by his mother's choices. "Ms. Duggar, your son is clearly distressed," he observed again, more firmly this time. "For his sake, I strongly encourage you to de-escalate the situation and comply with lawful directions." Brittany's response was to once again use her son as a prop, crouching down to embrace him while ensuring her camera captured the moment. "They're trying to make you feel bad so Mommy will give up her rights," she told him, loud enough for everyone to hear. "This is how tyranny works. They use children as emotional leverage." Officer Meacham exchanged glances with the other officers present, all recognizing the manipulation, but also genuinely concerned for the child's welfare. "Ms. Duggar, no one is trying to use your son," Officer Meacham stated clearly for the record. "We're concerned about the impact this situation is having on him, which is why we're trying to resolve it as quickly and peacefully as possible." The standoff at Denver International Airport had now consumed almost 45 minutes, with TSA Supervisor Marcus Campbell conferring with Airport Operations Manager Michelle Bennett about the cascading effects on flight operations. "We've got passengers missing connections in 6 different hubs," Bennett explained, checking her tablet. "Airlines are requesting resolution timeline estimates for crew scheduling." Officer Meacham understood the growing pressure to resolve the situation, but remained committed to finding the least confrontational solution possible, especially with a child involved. "I understand the operational impact," he assured Bennett. "We're approaching the point where removal will be necessary if there's no compliance." Brittany Duggar had shifted strategies slightly, now addressing her commentary directly to her phone rather than the officers, clearly performing for a future audience. "This is day 3 of my investigation into TSA constitutional violations," she narrated, though Officer Meacham noted the apparent contradiction with her earlier claims of attempting to catch a flight. "As you can see, they're now threatening arrest for simply asserting basic rights guaranteed by the Supreme Court." Officer Meacham decided to make one final attempt at peaceful resolution before escalation became unavoidable. "Ms. Duggar," he began using a calm but authoritative tone, "I need to inform you that airport operations are now significantly impacted by this situation." As he spoke, TSA Supervisor Campbell approached with information that changed the dynamic. "Officer Meacham, we've confirmed with airline manifests that there is no passenger named Brittany Duggar booked on any flight departing Denver today," he reported, loud enough for Brittany to hear. "Additionally, Denver Airport Police records indicate 2 previous contacts with Ms. Duggar for similar incidents in March and April of this year." The information confirmed what Officer Meacham had suspected. This was a deliberate attempt to create a confrontation rather than a genuine travel dispute. "Thank you, Supervisor Campbell," he acknowledged, turning back to Brittany. "Ms. Duggar, it appears you have no actual travel plans today, is that correct?" Brittany's expression flickered briefly with surprise at the revelation before she rallied with a new argument. "My travel arrangements are private and protected by the Fourth Amendment," she insisted, avoiding a direct answer. "And any previous interactions with corporate security forces were also violations of my rights that are currently subject to federal litigation." Officer Meacham nodded, having expected this response. Ms. Duggar, if you have no legitimate reason to be at the security checkpoint, then you are deliberately obstructing airport security operations, he explained patiently. This is a violation of both federal regulations and state law. Seeing that her performance was shifting from favorable to incriminating, Brittany suddenly changed tactics again. I'm leaving under duress and under threat, she announced dramatically to her camera, though no one had physically approached her or placed hands on her. I do not consent to this restriction of my right to travel. Officer Meacham felt a moment of cautious optimism that she might be preparing to leave voluntarily, which would be the best possible outcome for all involved, especially her son. You're free to leave the checkpoint area at any time, Ms. Duggar, he confirmed. We can escort you to the public area of the terminal if you'd like. Just as it seemed resolution might be possible, Brittany abruptly pivoted again, pointing to a printed sign listing TSA requirements. That sign states, "Passengers must present valid identification," she declared triumphantly. I am not a passenger, I am a traveler. Your own signage creates the legal distinction that exempts me from these requirements. The semantic argument was familiar to Officer Meacham from previous sovereign citizen encounters, the belief that specific word choices could somehow exempt individuals from laws that applied to everyone else. Ms. Duggar, the legal requirements apply to all individuals seeking to enter the secure area of the airport, regardless of what terminology you prefer, he explained patiently. Brittany responded by pulling out yet another document from her seemingly endless supply of pseudo-legal papers. I have here my UCC 1308 reservation of rights that explicitly rejects any presumption that I am engaged in commerce or subject to statutory jurisdiction, she proclaimed, holding up a paper covered with red stamps and signatures. Under the Universal Commercial Code, I have reserved all rights and rejected the offer to contract with the corporate entity known as the Transportation Security Administration. Officer Meacham recognized the document as another common sovereign citizen tool, completely meaningless in legal reality, but sold for hundreds of dollars to believers in the ideology. Ms. Duggar, the Uniform Commercial Code governs commercial transactions, not security regulations at federally regulated airports, Officer Meacham explained, knowing from experience that factual corrections rarely penetrated sovereign citizen belief systems. The requirements for accessing secure areas of airports are established by federal law and apply to all persons regardless of their personal beliefs about legal jurisdiction. Brittany's face flushed with fresh indignation as she turned back to her camera. Did you hear that? He just admitted these are beliefs about legal jurisdiction, she exclaimed, misrepresenting his statement. They know these are just opinions with no actual force of law. The young boy, Jacob, had begun to show signs of genuine distress beyond mere discomfort, his small shoulders shaking as he sat curled up with his tablet, the game long forgotten. Mom, I really want to go home now, he said, his voice wavering. I don't feel good and I'm scared. Officer Meacham noted the child's increasing anxiety with growing concern, recognizing that the situation was becoming genuinely traumatic for him. Ms. Duggar, your son is clearly distressed, he observed with genuine concern. For his sake, I strongly encourage you to end this confrontation and leave the checkpoint area. Brittany's response was to once again use her son's distress as material for her performance, crouching down to hug him while ensuring her camera captured the moment. See what they're doing to you, she told him loudly. This is government intimidation and terrorism. They're deliberately scaring you to make Mommy comply. The boy's eyes widened at these words, his confusion and fear visibly increasing at his mother's characterization of the situation. But I just want to go home, he repeated, his voice small and uncertain. I don't want to be at the airport anymore. Officer Meacham exchanged concerned glances with Supervisor Campbell and Operations Manager Bennett, all three recognizing that the child's welfare had become a primary concern beyond the operational impacts. Ms. Duggar, at this point I'm formally requesting that you leave the security checkpoint for the well-being of your son, Officer Meacham stated firmly but compassionately. This environment is clearly causing him distress, and continuing to keep him here raises concerns about his emotional welfare. The introduction of potential child welfare concerns seemed to finally penetrate Brittany's performance, her expression shifting momentarily to uncertainty before hardening again. "You're threatening to call child services now?" she demanded, her voice rising again. "This is exactly the kind of government overreach and intimidation that I'm documenting." Though Officer Meacham had made no specific mention of Child Protective Services, the fact that Brittany immediately jumped to this conclusion suggested she'd encountered similar situations before. "No one has mentioned Child Protective Services, Ms. Duggar," he clarified calmly. "I'm simply expressing concern for your son's well-being in this increasingly stressful situation, and suggesting that leaving the checkpoint would be in his best interest." Airport Operations Manager Bennett approached again, her expression conveying increasing urgency. "Officer Meacham, we now have delays affecting the entire East Terminal," she reported quietly. "The FAA is implementing ground delays for Denver departures, which will soon affect arrivals as well." The operational impact had expanded beyond the immediate area to potentially affecting the national air traffic system, escalating the situation to a level where immediate resolution was becoming unavoidable. "Thank you, Ms. Bennett," Officer Meacham acknowledged, before turning back to Brittany. "Ms. Duggar, the situation has escalated to the point where it's affecting national air traffic. This will be your final opportunity to leave voluntarily before formal removal." Brittany's response was to pull out her phone's notepad app and begin typing dramatically again. "I'm documenting your threats and intimidation tactics," she announced loudly, ensuring her camera captured the performance. "I'm adding commercial airline delays to my federal lawsuit under Title 18 U.S.C. 242. Officer Meacham had maintained remarkable patience throughout the confrontation, but the time for resolution had clearly arrived. "Ms. Duggar, please listen carefully," he said, his tone firm but professional. "You have two options at this point. You can leave the checkpoint area voluntarily, or you will be placed under arrest for interference with security operations and removed from the area. Which do you choose?" The ultimatum seemed to be exactly what Brittany had been waiting for, her expression shifting to one of triumph rather than concern. "I do not consent to either option," she declared loudly, ensuring her camera captured her defiance. "I stand on my rights as a living woman and private attorney general conducting an investigation into TSA constitutional violations." Officer Meacham nodded slightly, having expected this response, but having held out hope for a more peaceful resolution. "I understand that you're refusing to leave voluntarily," he confirmed for the record. "In that case, I need to inform you that you're being placed under arrest for interference with security operations under Colorado Revised Statutes 1809-117. The declaration of arrest marked a critical escalation point in the confrontation, with Officer Meacham immediately signaling to the other officers positioned around the perimeter. "Ms. Duggar, please put down your phone and place your hands behind your back," he instructed firmly, but without raising his voice. "I need you to comply for your safety and for your son's well-being." Brittany's response was immediate and predictable, her voice rising to a near shout as she backed away, still filming. "I do not consent to your arrest. I do not consent to your touching my person. This is assault and battery under common law," she declared, while simultaneously reaching into her purse with her free hand. Officer Meacham immediately became more alert at the unpredictable hand movement. "Ma'am, please keep your hands where I can see them and put down your phone," he instructed more forcefully, concerned about what she might be reaching for. "For everyone's safety, I need you to comply with instructions now." Brittany pulled out not a weapon but another document, this one with a large red stamp declaring Notice of Non-Consent to Arrest across the top. I'm serving you with this notice that any attempt to place hands on my person constitutes felony assault and kidnapping, she shouted, thrusting the paper toward Officer Meacham while continuing to film with her other hand. The young boy, Jacob, began to cry openly now, the escalating tension finally overwhelming his attempts to detach from the situation. "Mom, please stop," he pleaded, his small voice breaking. "Just do what they say so we can go." Officer Meacham felt a pang of genuine sympathy for the child caught in this traumatic situation, not of his making. "Ms. Duggar, your son is clearly distressed," he observed again, trying one last approach to peaceful resolution. "Please consider his well-being and comply with instructions so we can resolve this situation with minimal trauma for him." For a brief moment, maternal concern seemed to penetrate Brittany's sovereign citizen performance as she glanced at her crying son. "It's okay, Jacob," she said, her voice momentarily softening. "Mommy's standing up for our rights." But the moment passed quickly. As she turned back to the officers, her expression hardening again. "I'm placing you all under citizen's arrest for attempting to violate my constitutional rights," she declared loudly. "Under Article 9 of the Bill of Rights, I have the authority to resist unlawful detention with all necessary force." Officer Meacham noted the reference to a non-existent Article 9 of the Bill of Rights, another common sovereign citizen fabrication. With the situation clearly requiring intervention and concern for the child's welfare becoming paramount, Officer Meacham made the difficult decision to proceed with the arrest. "Officers, please secure Ms. Duggar and ensure the child's safety," he directed calmly, using practiced protocols for situations involving minors. "Ms. Duggar, we're going to place you in handcuffs now. Please don't resist for your safety and for your son's well-being." Two additional officers moved forward smoothly, their movements deliberate and controlled to minimize the potential for escalation or injury. Brittany's response was immediate and physical, backing away while continuing to film and reaching toward Jacob. "I'm taking my son and leaving under duress," she declared, attempting to grab the boy's arm while still filming with her other hand. "Jacob, get up. They're trying to kidnap us." The sudden movement and conflicting instructions clearly confused and frightened the child, who remained frozen in place, tears streaming down his face. "Mom, what's happening?" he asked, his voice small and terrified. "I don't understand what's happening." Officer Meacham recognized the potentially dangerous escalation and moved quickly to prevent Brittany from using her son as a physical shield or barrier to arrest. "Ms. Duggar, stop and place your hands behind your back," he instructed firmly, positioning himself between her and the child. "Jacob, you're not in any trouble." "Not in any. We just need your mom to follow instructions right now." Brittany responded by attempting to push past Officer Meacham to reach her son, her phone still recording while she shouted increasingly frantic sovereign citizen phrases. "I do not join in your procedure. I do not consent to joinder. This is kidnapping under color of law." The two supporting officers moved in smoothly, one gently securing Brittany's free arm, while the other carefully took the still recording phone from her hand. "Ma'am, please stop resisting," the female officer instructed calmly. "We're just placing you in handcuffs for safety while we resolve this situation." Brittany responded with increased physical resistance, pulling her arm away and attempting to twist free while shouting directly at her phone, which was now in the officer's hand, but still recording. "Police brutality, assault, battery! I do not consent to this touching of my person," she yelled, though the officers were using minimal necessary force and standard handcuffing techniques. Throughout the careful restraint process, Officer Meacham focused on Jacob, crouching down to the child's eye level, while the other officers secured Brittany. "Jacob, my name is Officer Sean," he said gently, using a calming tone completely different from the authoritative voice he'd used with Brittany. "You're not in any trouble, and no one is going to hurt you or your mom. We just need to sort out some rules that weren't being followed." The boy looked at him with wide, tear-filled eyes, clearly terrified by the escalation, but responding to the calm, direct communication. "Is my mom going to jail?" he asked in a small voice that cut through the commotion around them. Officer Meacham recognized the critical importance of honesty with the child while being age-appropriately sensitive. "Your mom needs to come with us to answer some questions," he explained gently, "but right now, I'm more concerned about making sure you're okay and safe. Is there someone we can call to come be with you? Maybe another family member?" Jacob nodded hesitantly, wiping tears from his cheeks with the back of his hand. "My dad," he whispered. "He's at work. His name is Daniel." Officer Meacham nodded encouragingly. "That's very helpful, Jacob. Do you know his phone number, or have it in your phone?" While Officer Meacham focused on Jacob's welfare, the other officers had successfully placed Brittany in handcuffs despite her continued verbal and physical resistance. "You are kidnapping me under color of law," she continued to shout, though her volume had decreased somewhat now that the physical confrontation was resolved. "I demand to be taken before a constitutional judge. I do not consent to this commercial detention." Officer Lisa Rodriguez, the female officer who had assisted with the arrest, carefully secured Brittany's purse and collection of sovereign citizen documents as evidence while maintaining professional composure despite the continued verbal onslaught. Airport Operations Manager Michelle Bennett had already contacted Airport Social Services, a specialized unit for handling situations involving minors at the airport. "Officer Meacham, we have a child advocate en route to assist with the minor," she reported quietly. "They can help facilitate contact with the father and provide support until he arrives." Officer Meacham nodded his appreciation, maintaining his focus on Jacob, who was watching his mother's continued resistance with wide, frightened eyes. "Thank you, Ms. Bennett. Jacob has indicated his father might be available to take custody," he responded. "We'll need to confirm identity and custody status before release." Brittany, now secured in handcuffs but still verbal, attempted to direct her arguments to the gathering crowd of onlookers and delayed travelers. "This is what happens in America now," she called out. "They arrest mothers in front of their children for asserting constitutional rights." Most travelers averted their eyes or shook their heads, clearly unsympathetic to her performance after witnessing the extended disruption of their travel plans. "You've been delaying these people for almost an hour," Officer Rodriguez pointed out calmly. "They're not your audience. They're victims of your disruption." The observation seemed to further agitate Brittany, who redirected her focus to her son. "Jacob, record this on your tablet," she called out. "Make sure you get all their faces and badge numbers." The attempt to enlist her son in continuing her performance despite his obvious distress concerned Officer Meacham deeply. "Ms. Duggar, please don't involve your son further in this situation," he requested firmly. "He's clearly upset, and asking him to record police is inappropriate given his age and emotional state." Jacob made no move toward his tablet, instead looking at Officer Meacham with an expression that seemed to blend fear with a strange relief that an adult was setting boundaries. TSA Supervisor Marcus Campbell had been coordinating with security staff to begin moving delayed travelers through adjacent checkpoints, working to minimize the operational impact now that the primary disruption was being resolved. "We're reopening lanes 3 and 4 for priority processing of delayed passengers," he reported to Operations Manager Bennett. "Airlines have been notified that screening is resuming normal operations." The immediate practical concerns of airport operations continued alongside the human drama, a reminder of the complex interconnected systems affected by a single individual's disruptive choices. Officer Meacham noticed that Jacob was now looking at his mother with an expression that seemed to blend embarrassment with a strange detachment, as if this scene were somehow familiar to him. "Has your mom done something like this before?" he asked gently, careful not to lead the child or put him in the position of informing against his parent. Jacob nodded slightly, his eyes downcast. "At the grocery store," he said quietly, "and at school when they wanted me to wear a mask, and at the airport in Phoenix." The revelation confirmed Officer Meacham's suspicion that this was a pattern of behavior that had repeatedly exposed the child to traumatic confrontations. A female airport social worker arrived, introducing herself quietly to Officer Meacham as Diane Winters from the Family Assistance Program. "I can stay with Jacob while you complete processing his mother," she offered, her tone professional but warm. "We have a comfortable room near the security office where he can wait for his father." Officer Meacham nodded appreciatively before turning back to Jacob. "Jacob, this is Ms. Winters. She's going to take you to a quiet room with snacks and games where you can wait while we sort things out with your mom," he explained gently. "Is that okay with you?" Jacob looked uncertainly between Officer Meacham and his mother, who was still vocally protesting her detention while being prepared for transport to the airport police station. "Will my dad come there?" he asked, his primary concern clearly finding stability in the chaos. "Yes, we're going to call him right away," Officer Meacham assured him. "Do you have his number in your phone or tablet?" Jacob nodded, picking up his tablet and navigating to the contacts list with the practiced ease of a digital native. "His name is Daniel Duggar," he confirmed, showing the screen to Officer Meacham. "He works at the hospital as a doctor." The information provided a new context for the family dynamic, suggesting a possible co-parenting situation complicated by extreme ideological differences. "Thank you, Jacob. That's very helpful," Officer Meacham acknowledged, making note of the contact information. "Ms. Winters will help you call your dad, and she'll stay with you until he arrives." Jacob gathered his tablet and backpack, casting one last uncertain look at his mother before allowing himself to be led away by the social worker, his small shoulders slumped with what appeared to be equal parts distress and relief. With Jacob safely in the care of airport social services and Brittany Duggar secured for transport to the airport police station, Officer Meacham turned his attention to the procedural aspects of the arrest. "Ms. Duggar, you're under arrest for interference with security screening operations under Colorado Revised Statutes 18-9117 and resisting arrest under 18-8-103, he informed her formally, ensuring his body camera recorded the advisement. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you. Do you understand these rights as I have explained them to you?" Brittany's response was predictable, given her sovereign citizen ideology. "I do not consent to these proceedings. I do not recognize your corporate jurisdiction or authority to detain my person," she declared, still performing for an audience, though her phone had been secured as evidence. "I demand to be taken before a constitutional judge and jury of my peers immediately." Officer Meacham had expected this response, but was required to ensure the Miranda advisement was properly delivered. "Regardless of whether you consent, I need to know if you understand the rights I just explained to you," he repeated patiently. "Do you understand these rights?" "I understand that you're committing kidnapping under color of law and violating my constitutional rights under the original jurisdiction," Brittany responded, avoiding a direct answer to the simple question. "I reserve all rights under UCC 13008 and demand a habeas corpus hearing before an Article 3 court." Officer Meacham nodded, making note of her response while signaling to Officer Rodriguez to prepare for transport. "I'm documenting that rights were advised and the suspect refused to provide a clear response regarding understanding," he stated for the record. "We'll proceed with transport to the airport police station for processing." As they prepared to move Brittany to the transport vehicle, Airport Operations Manager Michelle Bennett approached with an update. TSA screening has resumed normal operations, and delayed flights are being prioritized for departure, she reported. We're looking at approximately 90 minutes to clear the backlog. Officer Meacham nodded, grateful that the operational impact was being addressed efficiently. Thank you for the update, Ms. Bennett. Has there been any contact with the boy's father? Bennett checked her tablet before responding. Family Services reports they've reached Dr. Duggar, and he's en route to the airport now. Estimated arrival within 20 minutes. The mention of her ex-husband seemed to trigger a new level of agitation in Brittany. You have no authority to contact my ex-husband, she declared, struggling briefly against her restraints. He has no custody rights this week. This is parental alienation and interference with a custody agreement. Officer Meacham made note of this outburst, recognizing it might indicate additional complications in the family situation. Ms. Duggar, when a parent is arrested with a minor child present, we're required by law to contact the other parent or legal guardian, he explained calmly. Family Services will verify any custody arrangements before releasing your son. As they moved through the terminal toward the police station, Brittany continued her sovereign citizen declarations, though with diminishing volume and energy as the reality of her situation became increasingly apparent. I am a living woman traveling upon the land. I am not a corporate entity subject to your statutory jurisdiction, she insisted, though the words seemed more rote recitation than genuine belief at this point. Under Admiralty law, you cannot detain a sovereign without an injured party. Officer Rodriguez, walking alongside while assisting with the transport, maintained professional composure despite the continuous stream of pseudo-legal jargon. The airport police station was located in a secure area of the terminal, designed to process individuals while maintaining the unique security requirements of an international airport. We'll process her in interview room 2, Officer Meacham directed as they arrived at the station. I want to complete the paperwork quickly so I can check on the child's welfare. Sergeant Jessica Harris, the desk supervisor on duty, looked up from her computer as they entered with Brittany. We've got the arrest forms ready, she confirmed. Family Services called to confirm the father has appropriate custody documentation and is en route. Once inside the processing area, Brittany was seated in an interview room equipped with video recording equipment, her handcuffs secured to a fixed ring on the table for safety. Ms. Duggar, we're going to process your arrest now, Officer Meacham explained professionally. This will include collecting your personal information, photographing, and fingerprinting. Brittany's response was to immediately declare, I do not consent to joinder with your corporate process. I do not consent to establishing a legal nexus through providing information. I am a living woman, not a corporate entity or legal fiction. Despite her continued refusals, Officer Meacham proceeded methodically with the booking process, documenting her statements but completing the required procedures. Suspect refuses to provide identification information, he noted in the report. Identity confirmed through previous contact records and Colorado DMV database. As he worked, Sergeant Harris approached with additional information. Officer Meacham, we've got a hit on a bolo from Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport, she reported quietly. Subject Brittany Duggar was involved in a similar checkpoint disruption in March, with sovereign citizen rhetoric and obstruction charges. The information confirmed what Officer Meacham had suspected. This was not an isolated incident, but part of a pattern of deliberate disruptions. Any federal charges or warrants outstanding? He asked, considering the implications for the current case. Sergeant Harris checked her terminal before responding. No active warrants, but there's a flag in the TSA database noting the pattern of behavior across multiple airports. Phoenix charges are still pending trial. Officer Meacham nodded thoughtfully, making note of the additional context in his report. This will likely interest the U.S. Attorney's Office, especially with the claim of being a private attorney general, potentially constituting impersonation of a federal officer. While Officer Rodriguez completed the booking photographs and fingerprinting despite Brittany's continued verbal objections and refusals, Officer Meacham stepped out to check on Jacob's status. Family Services Specialist Diane Winters met him in the hallway with an update. Dr. Duggar has arrived and provided documentation confirming joint legal custody, she reported. He appears appropriate and concerned primarily with his son's welfare. Jacob responded positively to seeing his father. Officer Meacham felt relief at this development, at least one aspect of the complex situation resolving positively. "I'd like to speak with Dr. Duggar briefly if possible," he requested. "There may be relevant context for our investigation." In a quiet consultation room adjacent to the family services area, Officer Meacham found Dr. Daniel Duggar sitting with his son, who was now calmer, though still subdued. "Dr. Duggar, I'm Officer Meacham," he introduced himself, extending his hand. "I was the primary responding officer to the incident involving your ex-wife." Daniel Duggar stood to shake his hand, his expression a complex mixture of embarrassment, concern, and what appeared to be resignation. "Thank you for your professionalism," he said quietly. "Jacob told me you were kind to him during a difficult situation." Officer Meacham smiled briefly at Jacob before addressing his father again. "I wanted to check on Jacob's welfare and also ask a few questions that might help us understand the context of today's incident," he explained. "Would it be possible to speak privately for a moment?" Dr. Duggar nodded, turning to his son. "Jacob, can you wait here with Ms. Winters for just a few minutes while I talk to Officer Meacham?" he asked gently. "I won't be far away." The boy nodded, returning his attention to a game on his tablet, while the two men stepped just outside the room. "I want to be clear that Jacob is not in any trouble, and he handled himself very well in a difficult situation," Officer Meacham began, wanting to establish the positive aspects first. However, he did mention that this wasn't the first time his mother had been involved in this type of confrontation. Dr. Duggar sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of evident frustration. "No, unfortunately it's not," he confirmed. "Brittany got involved with sovereign citizen ideology about 3 years ago after losing her paralegal job. It's been a nightmare, especially for Jacob." The confirmation of the pattern and its timeline provided valuable context for the investigation. "We're concerned not just about the security disruption, but about the impact on Jacob," Officer Meacham explained. "Being repeatedly exposed to these confrontations with authorities could be considered a form of emotional endangerment." Dr. Duggar nodded grimly, his professional medical training clearly informing his understanding of the psychological impacts. "I've been documenting these incidents for our ongoing custody case," he explained. "I have temporary physical custody during school weeks, but Brittany has weekends and school breaks under our current arrangement. I've been trying to get that modified based on her escalating behavior." Officer Meacham made notes of this information, recognizing its relevance to both the current case and potential child welfare considerations. "We'll be completing a report that will be available to family court if needed," he assured Dr. Duggar. "Our primary concern right now is Jacob's immediate welfare and ensuring he's in a safe environment." Daniel Duggar's expression reflected both gratitude and determination. "He'll be with me now, and I'll be contacting our family attorney immediately to seek emergency modification of the custody order based on today's events," he explained. "Jacob has therapy sessions scheduled already. This isn't the first time he's been traumatized by her sovereign citizen activities." The conversation provided crucial context while confirming that Jacob would be in appropriate care following the incident. "I appreciate your cooperation, Dr. Duggar," Officer Meacham said sincerely. "We may need to contact you for additional information as the case proceeds, especially if federal charges are considered." Daniel Duggar nodded his understanding before glancing back at his son through the window. "What happens next with Brittany?" he asked, his tone suggesting he'd navigated the criminal justice system's intersection with his ex-wife's activities before. Will she be released soon? She's currently being processed on state charges of interfering with airport security operations and resisting arrest, Officer Meacham explained. Given the nature of the incident and her statements about being a private attorney general, there may also be federal interest in the case. She'll have an initial appearance before a judge who will set bail conditions. Daniel Duggar nodded grimly, seemingly unsurprised by the information. I should get Jacob home, he said quietly. Today has been traumatic enough without him having to see his mother in custody. Please let me know if there's anything else you need from us. Officer Meacham assured him that Family Services had all necessary contact information and would be in touch if any additional statements or information were needed. With Jacob's welfare addressed, he returned to the processing area where Brittany Duggar continued to resist the booking process through verbal declarations while Officers Rodriguez and Williams methodically completed the required documentation. I've been unlawfully kidnapped by agents of a corporation, she was insisting as he entered. I demand to be brought before a constitutional judge and jury of my peers immediately. Sergeant Harris approached with additional information as Officer Meacham rejoined the processing team. We've been contacted by the FBI field office, she reported quietly. They're sending Agent Thomas Wilson to interview the subject regarding potential federal violations, including impersonation of a federal official and interference with air transportation. The escalation to federal involvement wasn't surprising given the nature of the incident and Brittany's specific claims. Let's complete the local processing and secure all evidence, particularly her phone and documents, Officer Meacham directed. Those will be especially relevant to any federal charges. The arrival of FBI agent Thomas Wilson marked a significant escalation in the case, transforming what might have been a routine airport disturbance into a federal investigation. Agent Wilson, I'm Officer Meacham, he introduced himself as the FBI agent presented his credentials at the airport police station. Thank you for responding so quickly. Agent Wilson, a tall man with a methodical manner that suggested years of investigative experience, nodded professionally. We've been tracking a pattern of sovereign citizen disruptions at transportation hubs across the western region, he explained. This case fits the profile we've been monitoring, especially the private attorney general claim. Officer Meacham led Agent Wilson to a conference room where they could review the evidence and body cam footage before interviewing Brittany Duggar. We've secured her phone, which was recording throughout the incident, as well as multiple sovereign citizen documents she attempted to present as legal identification, he explained, laying out the items in evidence bags on the table. She specifically claimed to be a private attorney general on urgent judicial business while presenting fraudulent credentials at the security checkpoint. Agent Wilson examined the documents with particular interest, photographing several with his agency phone. These are consistent with materials sold by the American Freedom Liberation Front, a sovereign citizen group based in Nevada, he observed, pointing to distinctive red stamps and formatting on several documents. They charge followers thousands of dollars for these worthless credentials and immunity certificates. The private attorney general claim is particularly concerning from a federal perspective as it constitutes impersonation of a federal official under 18 U.S.C. 912. Officer Meacham nodded, having suspected the federal implications of Brittany's specific claims. She also referenced serving as a private attorney general conducting an investigation into TSA practices, he added. The entire confrontation appeared deliberately staged to create content for sovereign citizen social media channels. Agent Wilson made notes while reviewing the evidence. We've been seeing an increase in this specific type of confrontation, he explained. Sovereign citizens deliberately creating checkpoint disruptions to generate video evidence of government overreach, that they then use for recruitment and fundraising online. He paused over one particular document bearing an elaborate gold seal. This certificate of universal travel immunity is sold for $200 on their website. They falsely tell followers it exempts them from all security, screening requirements under international law. After reviewing the evidence and Officer Meacham's preliminary report, they proceeded to interview room 2, where Brittany Duggar remained in custody, having exhausted much of her earlier energy, but still occasionally declaring sovereign citizen phrases to the recording equipment. Ms. Duggar, I'm Special Agent Thomas Wilson with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. He introduced himself formally as they entered the room. I'm here to interview you regarding potential federal violations committed at Denver International Airport today. Brittany's expression shifted from fatigue to renewed defiance at the introduction of a federal agent sitting up straighter in her chair. I do not consent to any interview with agents of the corporate federal government, she declared, though with less volume than her earlier pronouncements. I demand to be brought before a constitutional judge under Article 3 jurisdiction. Agent Wilson remained unperturbed by the familiar sovereign citizen response, setting up a recording device on the table. Ms. Duggar, this interview is being recorded. Regardless of your consent, I'm required to advise you of your rights under Miranda, he stated professionally. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in court. You have the right to an attorney before and during questioning. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed for you. Do you understand these rights? Brittany's response was to launch into another sovereign citizen declaration. I am a living woman, not a corporate entity or legal fiction. I do not recognize the jurisdiction of admiralty courts operating under the gold-fringed flag, she insisted, avoiding a direct answer to the simple question. I am a private attorney general conducting an investigation into constitutional violations by TSA agents. Agent Wilson made note of her response, particularly the repetition of the private attorney general claim that was central to potential federal charges. I'm documenting that rights were advised, and the subject declined to provide a clear response regarding understanding, he stated for the record. Ms. Duggar, are you claiming to be an attorney or a federal official? The direct question seemed to momentarily throw Brittany off her rehearsed script. I am a private attorney general operating under the authority of the common law and the original constitutional jurisdiction, she replied after a brief hesitation. I have the authority to investigate constitutional violations under the provisions of the Magna Carta as incorporated into American common law. Agent Wilson maintained a neutral expression while making notes, recognizing the jumble of misunderstood legal concepts typical of sovereign citizen ideology. Can you explain what specific authority appoints or recognizes private attorneys general under U.S. federal law? He asked, giving her the opportunity to either clarify or further incriminate herself. Brittany's response was to pull from memory another piece of sovereign citizen pseudo-legal terminology. The Supreme Court recognized the status of private attorneys general in Newman v. Piggy Park Enterprises, she declared, with apparent confidence. As a living woman who has filed my UCC 1308 reservation of rights and reclaimed my sovereign status, I have standing to enforce constitutional provisions against government overreach. Agent Wilson nodded while making notes, recognizing her misapplication of a real case that had nothing to do with sovereign citizen claims. The Newman case refers to private citizens bringing civil rights lawsuits not to any special legal status or exemption from security regulations, he clarified for the record. Did you present yourself as having legal or governmental authority to TSA agents today? The question was carefully crafted to establish a key element of the federal impersonation charge, and Brittany's response was potentially incriminating. I presented my credentials as a private attorney general conducting an official investigation into TSA constitutional violations, she confirmed, apparently believing this strengthened her position rather than established a federal crime. I informed them that I was operating under Article 4 authority to document government overreach and color of law violations. Agent Wilson continued his methodical questioning, building a clear record of Brittany's claims and actions. "Did you purchase the credentials and documents you presented today?" he asked, shifting to establish the financial aspect of the scheme. Brittany hesitated slightly before responding, perhaps recognizing the potential implications of admitting financial transactions. "I made a donation to the American Freedom Liberation Front in exchange for educational materials about constitutional rights," she said carefully. "The credentials are simply a verification that I've completed their constitutional law training program." Agent Wilson made note of this admission, recognizing its value in connecting her to the larger sovereign citizen organization under investigation. "And approximately how much was this donation for the credentials and documents?" he asked, maintaining a conversational tone despite the significant investigative value of her answers. "The constitutional law training program requires a commitment of resources to demonstrate seriousness," Brittany replied evasively. "I dedicated approximately $3,000 to obtaining the proper credentials and legal documents to conduct my work as a private attorney general." The admission of the substantial payment would be valuable evidence in building a case against both Brittany and the organization selling fraudulent legal credentials. "And what did you understand these credentials would allow you to do?" Agent Wilson continued, methodically establishing the elements of potential fraud and impersonation charges. Brittany's response demonstrated the dangerous misunderstandings propagated by sovereign citizen groups. "My credentials exempt me from corporate policies masquerading as law," she explained with apparent sincerity. "As a private attorney general, I have immunity from statutory jurisdiction and the authority to investigate constitutional violations by government agents. I can travel freely without corporate permission, slips like ID cards or boarding passes, because I'm not engaging in regulated commerce, but exercising my fundamental right to travel." Agent Wilson maintained his professional demeanor while documenting these statements, recognizing them as clear evidence of the fraudulent claims made by the organization selling the worthless credentials. As the interview continued, Agent Wilson systematically covered each element of potential federal charges, from impersonation of a federal official to interference with airport security operations and interstate transportation. "Ms. Duggar, I note that in your earlier statements to airport police, you mentioned this was day 3 of your investigation," he observed. "Have you conducted similar activities at other airports recently?" The question was designed to establish the pattern of behavior across jurisdictions, potentially elevating the seriousness of the federal case. "I have conducted investigations at multiple transportation hubs to document the systematic violation of Americans' right to travel," Brittany confirmed, seemingly proud of this admission rather than recognizing its incriminating nature. "And were these investigations coordinated with other members of the American Freedom Liberation Front?" Agent Wilson asked, probing for connections to the larger organization. "We have a network of private attorneys general conducting simultaneous investigations across the country," Brittany responded, providing valuable intelligence about the scope of the sovereign citizen operation. "We document the violations, publish our findings, and educate Americans about how their rights are being systematically violated by corporate government entities." The admission of a coordinated network conducting similar disruptions at multiple airports would be significant to the FBI's broader investigation of sovereign citizen groups targeting transportation infrastructure. After nearly an hour of methodical questioning, Agent Wilson had established a comprehensive record of Brittany's actions, beliefs, and connections to the larger sovereign citizen movement. "I'll be concluding the interview at this time," he announced for the recording. The time is 14:37. Interview with Brittany Duggar is now complete. As he gathered his materials, he addressed Officer Meacham. I'll need certified copies of all evidence, body cam footage, and witness statements for the U.S. Attorney's Office, he requested. Based on the evidence and admissions, we'll likely be pursuing federal charges of impersonation of a federal official and interference with airport security operations. Once outside the interview room, Agent Wilson provided additional context to Officer Meacham and Sergeant Harris. The American Freedom Liberation Front is currently under federal investigation for fraud, tax evasion, and domestic terrorism threats, he explained quietly. Duggar appears to be a mid-level participant rather than a leader, but her actions today and admissions about a coordinated network of investigators provide valuable evidence for our larger case. Officer Meacham nodded his understanding of the broader implications. What happens next with her case specifically, he inquired, considering the intersection of local and federal charges. She'll face local charges first for the immediate disruption and resisting arrest, Agent Wilson explained. The U.S. Attorney will review the evidence for federal charges, which will likely be pursued given the interstate nature of the scheme and the specific claim of federal authority. We'll coordinate with your department throughout the process. Sergeant Harris agreed to ensure all evidence was properly preserved and transferred according to chain of custody requirements. We'll complete processing on the local charges and coordinate with the district attorney's office regarding her initial appearance, she confirmed. Officer Meacham felt a mixture of professional satisfaction at the thorough handling of a complex case and personal concern for the child caught in the middle of his mother's destructive ideological choices. Agent Wilson, are you aware that Duggar's son was present throughout the incident? He asked. There's an ongoing custody situation with her ex-husband, who took custody of the boy after today's events. The FBI agent made note of this additional information. That's relevant to our case as well, he acknowledged. Using a minor in the commission of these activities adds another dimension to the charges. We'll need to interview the father and possibly the child with appropriate protections. The systematic processing of Brittany Duggar continued with formal booking on local charges while the evidence was prepared for transfer to federal authorities. Throughout the process, she maintained her sovereign citizen declarations, though with diminishing energy as the reality of her situation became increasingly apparent. I do not consent to these proceedings. I demand to be brought before a constitutional judge, she insisted as she was photographed and fingerprinted. Officer Rodriguez, who had assisted throughout the process, maintained professional composure while completing the required documentation. Ms. Duggar, regardless of your consent, these are the lawful procedures that apply when someone is arrested, she explained patiently. These procedures protect both your rights and public safety. The formal charging process moved forward efficiently, despite Brittany Duggar's continued objections and sovereign citizen declarations. Denver Assistant District Attorney Elena Morales arrived at the airport police station to review the case and determine appropriate local charges before Brittany's initial court appearance. Based on the evidence and officer statements, we'll be charging her with interference with transportation facilities under Colorado Revised Statutes 18-9-114, resisting arrest under 18-8-103, and obstruction of government operations under 18-8-102, she informed Officer Meacham after reviewing the case file. Given the disruption to airport operations and flight schedules, these are serious charges that could result in significant penalties. Officer Meacham nodded his understanding of the legal strategy. The FBI is also pursuing federal charges related to impersonation of a federal official and interference with airport security, he noted. Agent Wilson indicated they've been tracking a pattern of similar disruptions organized by this sovereign citizen group. Ada Morales made note of this additional context while reviewing the charging documents. That's relevant to our case as well, especially for bail considerations, she acknowledged. We'll want to ensure she doesn't immediately return to the airport or other transportation facilities to repeat this behavior while awaiting trial. While the legal processes advanced, Officer Meacham focused on completing his detailed incident report, documenting every aspect of the confrontation and arrest with the precision developed over 12 years of law enforcement experience. Officer Meacham, we've received a request from Child Protective Services regarding this case, Sergeant Harris informed him, approaching his desk with additional paperwork. They're conducting an assessment based on the child's presence during the incident and requested your observations regarding potential emotional endangerment. Officer Meacham wasn't surprised by this development, having recognized the concerning pattern of a child being repeatedly exposed to volatile confrontations with authorities. I'll complete their questionnaire and provide a copy of my body cam footage showing the child's distress during the incident, he responded, accepting the additional forms. I also documented the child's statement that this wasn't the first such incident he'd witnessed, which supports a pattern of emotional endangerment. Sergeant Harris nodded gravely, having reviewed the footage herself. The father seemed appropriate and concerned primarily with his son's welfare, she observed. He mentioned ongoing custody proceedings where this incident will likely be relevant. Officer Meacham agreed, recalling his conversation with Dr. Duggar. He indicated he's already pursuing modification of their custody arrangement based on escalating sovereign citizen activities, he confirmed. Today's incident will provide additional documentation for those proceedings. The intersection of criminal charges, child welfare concerns, and family court matters created a complex web of consequences stemming from Brittany Duggar's choices, extending far beyond the immediate disruption at the airport security checkpoint. Airport Operations Manager Michelle Bennett arrived at the police station to provide a final impact assessment for the incident report. The total operational impact included delays for 27 departing flights, affecting approximately 3,200 passengers, she reported, consulting her tablet. The estimated financial impact to airlines from additional fuel, crew time, and missed connections exceeds $170,000, though the final numbers are still being calculated. The concrete documentation of harm caused by the disruption would be significant for both prosecution and potential restitution requirements. Thank you for the detailed assessment, Officer Meacham acknowledged. That will be valuable for both local prosecution and the federal case. Michelle Bennett also provided additional context about the broader pattern affecting airports nationally. TSA headquarters has noted a 43% increase in sovereign citizen disruptions at security checkpoints over the past 6 months, she explained. They're developing specialized training for screening officers to recognize the specific language patterns and fraudulent documents associated with these incidents. Officer Meacham wasn't surprised by this trend, having noticed the increase in his own experience at Denver International. The sovereign citizen groups appear to be specifically targeting transportation hubs for maximum disruption and publicity, he observed. Today's incident fits that pattern perfectly. As the various aspects of the case were being processed, Officer Meacham received notification that Brittany Duggar's initial court appearance had been scheduled for the following morning. Ms. Duggar will be transferred to Denver County Jail for overnight holding before her arraignment at 9 a.m. tomorrow, Sergeant Harris informed him. The judge will determine bail conditions at that time. Officer Meacham nodded, making note of the schedule in his report. I'll plan to attend the arraignment to provide any testimony the court might require about the incident, he confirmed, committed to seeing the case through each step of the judicial process. The transfer team arrived to transport Brittany to the county jail for overnight holding, a standard procedure for defendants awaiting initial court appearances. Ms. Duggar, you're being transported to Denver County Jail, where you'll be held until your court appearance tomorrow morning, Officer Rodriguez explained professionally as they prepared for the transfer. At that time, a judge will inform you of the charges against you and make determinations about bail. Brittany, though physically compliant by this point, maintained her sovereign citizen objections. I do not consent to being transported to any corporate detention facility, she declared, though with noticeably less energy than her earlier pronouncements. I demand to be brought before a constitutional judge immediately. Officer Rodriguez maintained her professional demeanor despite the continued rhetorical resistance. Ms. Duggar, the court operates on a schedule determined by the judicial system, she explained patiently. Your initial appearance is scheduled for tomorrow morning at 9:05 a.m., which is the earliest available time on the court's calendar. Brittany's response indicated a fundamental misunderstanding of how the legal system actually functions, a common feature of sovereign citizen ideology. That's a corporate admiralty court operating under the Uniform Commercial Code, she insisted. I demand a common law court under original constitutional jurisdiction. As the transport team completed their preparations, Officer Meacham approached for a final confirmation before Brittany was transferred out of airport police jurisdiction. Ms. Duggar, is there anyone you would like us to notify about your arrest? He asked, following a standard procedure to allow defendants to inform family members or employers of their situation. Dr. Duggar has already been notified regarding your son's custody, but is there anyone else you'd like us to contact? Brittany's expression hardened at the mention of her ex-husband. You had no authority to contact him, she insisted again. He's part of the medical establishment enforcing pharmaceutical tyranny. That's why I've been educating Jacob about his natural rights and sovereign status. The statement provided additional context about the family dynamics and ideological conflicts likely affecting the child caught between opposing worldviews. Ms. Duggar, when a parent is arrested with a minor child present, we're legally required to contact the other parent or legal guardian, Officer Meacham explained again, patiently. Dr. Duggar provided documentation confirming shared legal custody, which gave him the legal right to take temporary physical custody of your son during your detention. Brittany's response suggested deeper conflicts underlying the immediate incident. He uses his medical authority to override my natural rights as a mother, she declared. That's why I've been teaching Jacob about the fraudulent nature of the corporate medical establishment. Officer Meacham made note of these statements, recognizing their potential relevance to ongoing custody proceedings and child welfare considerations. Is there anyone else you would like us to notify about your arrest? He repeated, returning to the practical matter at hand rather than engaging with the ideological declarations. After a moment's hesitation, Brittany provided the name and number of her sister in Colorado Springs, who Officer Rodriguez documented as an emergency contact. Thank you, Ms. Duggar. Officer Rodriguez will ensure your sister is notified of your situation and tomorrow's court appearance, Officer Meacham confirmed professionally. With the immediate processing complete and transfer arrangements finalized, Officer Meacham returned to the administrative aspects of the case, ensuring all evidence was properly cataloged and secured. The FBI has requested copies of all documents recovered from Ms. Duggar's possession, evidence technician Wilson informed him, organizing the collection of sovereign citizen materials seized during the arrest. They're particularly interested in the Certificate of Universal Travel Immunity and the private attorney general credentials for their ongoing investigation into the organization selling these fraudulent documents. Officer Meacham examined the elaborate but legally meaningless documents that had been central to the confrontation, noting the professional printing, gold seals, and red stamps designed to mimic official government credentials. These are increasingly sophisticated, he observed, comparing them to similar documents he'd encountered in previous sovereign citizen incidents. They're specifically designed to create confusion for frontline security personnel who might not immediately recognize them as fraudulent. Evidence technician Wilson nodded in agreement while photographing each document. The FBI agent mentioned they sell for thousands of dollars through sovereign citizen networks, marketed as legal ways to avoid security screening and identification requirements. Airport Security Director Raymond Chen arrived at the police station to review the incident and coordinate on security protocols moving forward. "Officer Meacham, thank you for your professional handling of a difficult situation," he began, extending his hand. "I've reviewed the preliminary reports and wanted to discuss potential adjustments to our security procedures based on today's events." Officer Meacham appreciated the proactive approach to learning from the incident rather than simply processing it as an isolated event. "I'd be happy to provide input," he responded. There are several points in the interaction where specific training might have helped TSA personnel recognize the sovereign citizen tactics earlier. Director Chen agreed, having already identified similar opportunities for improvement. "We're developing a specialized briefing for all screening personnel on recognizing sovereign citizen language patterns and fraudulent documents," he explained. "Today's incident will be incorporated as a case study once all the reports are finalized." Officer Meacham offered additional observations from his frontline experience with the confrontation. The key indicators were present in the first 30 seconds, specific phraseology about not consenting to jurisdiction and presentation of non-standard documents with elaborate seals, he noted. Early recognition could potentially allow for faster specialized response before the disruption escalates. As the various threads of the case were systematically addressed, Officer Meacham received a call from Family Services Specialist Diane Winters with an update on Jacob's situation. "Dr. Duggar and Jacob have left the airport," she reported. "I conducted a brief welfare assessment before release and didn't note any immediate concerns beyond the expected emotional impact of witnessing his mother's arrest." Dr. Duggar confirmed that Jacob has an established therapist who he'll see tomorrow to process today's events. Officer Meacham was relieved to hear that appropriate support systems were in place for the child, whose welfare had been a primary concern throughout the incident. "Did Jacob make any additional disclosures about previous similar incidents?" Officer Meacham inquired, considering the child welfare aspects of the case. "He mentioned to me that his mother had created similar disruptions at a grocery store, his school during mask requirements, and the Phoenix airport." Family Services Specialist Winters confirmed this pattern. "Yes, he elaborated on those incidents during our conversation," she reported. "He described feeling embarrassed and scared during these confrontations and mentioned that his mother records them for what she calls her constitutional education channel online." Dr. Duggar indicated he's been documenting these incidents for family court and has an emergency hearing scheduled for tomorrow regarding modification of their custody arrangement. The consistent pattern of a child being repeatedly exposed to confrontational situations raised serious child welfare concerns beyond the immediate criminal case. "I'll include Jacob's disclosures in my report and the child welfare assessment," Officer Meacham confirmed. The pattern of deliberately creating confrontations with authorities while involving a minor child seems to constitute emotional endangerment. Specialist Winters agreed with this assessment. "Family Services will be submitting our own report to Child Protective Services and the Family Court," she assured him. Dr. Duggar appears to be advocating appropriately for his son's well-being within the system. The morning of June 24th brought Brittany Duggar's initial court appearance, with Officer Meacham attending to provide testimony if required by the judge. Denver County Courtroom 4B was already busy with the day's arraignment calendar when he arrived, taking a seat in the area reserved for law enforcement witnesses. Assistant District Attorney Elena Morales acknowledged him with a professional nod as she organized her materials for the proceedings, having reviewed his comprehensive incident report earlier that morning. "Good morning, Officer Meacham," she greeted him quietly. "I don't anticipate needing testimony for the arraignment, but I wanted you present in case the judge has specific questions about the airport disruption." Officer Meacham nodded his understanding, having participated in countless court proceedings throughout his career. "I have the final impact assessment from airport operations if the court inquires about the scope of disruption," he informed her, referencing the detailed report documenting delayed flights, affected passengers, and financial impacts to airlines. Adia Morales appreciated the thorough preparation. "That will be valuable for arguing appropriate bail conditions," she acknowledged. "Given her history of similar disruptions and sovereign citizen ideology, we'll be requesting significant restrictions on accessing transportation facilities while awaiting trial." The courtroom atmosphere shifted noticeably when Brittany Duggar was escorted in by sheriff's deputies for her arraignment, her night in county jail having visibly affected her demeanor, though not her fundamental beliefs. "I do not consent to these proceedings," she announced immediately upon entering, prompting Judge Elaine Richardson to look up from her bench with an expression that suggested she'd encountered sovereign citizens before. "Ms. Duggar, please remain quiet until you're addressed by the court," the judge instructed firmly. "This is an arraignment hearing to inform you of the charges against you and address bail considerations, not to debate legal philosophies." Court-appointed defense attorney Michael Torres, who had briefly consulted with Brittany before the hearing, already appeared resigned to the challenges of representing a sovereign citizen defendant. "Your Honor, I've been appointed to represent Ms. Duggar for this arraignment," he began professionally. "However, I should note for the record that my client has expressed that she does not consent to representation by a bar attorney and wishes to represent herself." Judge Richardson nodded, clearly familiar with this common sovereign citizen position. "Ms. Duggar, you have the right to represent yourself, but I strongly advise against it," she addressed the defendant directly. "This is a complex case with serious charges that could result in significant jail time. Mr. Torres is an experienced attorney who can provide valuable guidance." Brittany responded with predictable sovereign citizen rhetoric. "I do not recognize the jurisdiction of this Admiralty Court operating under the gold fringe flag," she declared, pointing to the standard American flag displayed in the courtroom corner. "I demand a common law court under original constitutional jurisdiction." Judge Richardson maintained her professional composure, addressing the defendant with firm patience. "Ms. Duggar, this is the District Court for the City and County of Denver, State of Colorado, with proper jurisdiction over criminal matters occurring within its boundaries," she explained clearly. "There is no fringe on the flag, and even if there were, it would have no bearing on this court's jurisdiction. We will proceed with the arraignment." Ada Morales stepped forward to present the charges. "Your Honor, the State of Colorado charges Brittany Duggar with 3 counts: interference with transportation facilities under Colorado Revised Statutes 18-9-114, a Class 3 felony; resisting arrest under 18-8-103, a Class 2 misdemeanor; and obstruction of government operations under 18-8-102, a Class 3 misdemeanor. She then summarized the incident at Denver International Airport, highlighting the significant disruption to airport operations, the presence of a minor child during the confrontation, and the defendant's history of similar incidents at other transportation facilities. Additionally, Your Honor, I should inform the court that the FBI has opened an investigation into Ms. Duggar regarding potential federal charges of impersonation of a federal official and interference with airport security operations, Ada Morales continued. Agent Thomas Wilson of the Denver FBI field office interviewed the defendant yesterday and has indicated that federal charges are likely forthcoming based on her claims of being a private attorney general with special legal authority. The mention of pending federal charges clearly registered with Judge Richardson, who made note of this significant escalation in the seriousness of Brittany's legal situation. When asked how she pleaded to the charges, Brittany launched into another sovereign citizen declaration. "I do not enter a plea as it would create joinder with these unlawful proceedings," she announced. "I am a living woman, not a corporate entity or legal fiction. I do not consent to these administrative procedures masquerading as due process." Judge Richardson, maintaining her professional demeanor despite the predictable resistance, addressed defense attorney Torres. "Counsel, given your client's refusal to enter a plea, the court will enter a plea of not guilty on her behalf to preserve her rights. Does the defense wish to address bail considerations?" Attorney Torres approached the matter pragmatically, recognizing the challenges of representing a defendant who rejected the fundamental premises of the legal system. "Your Honor, despite my client's position on the court's jurisdiction, I would ask the court to consider that Ms. Duggar has established residence in Colorado, has family ties to the community, and is the mother of a minor child," he argued professionally. "While I acknowledge the seriousness of the disruption at the airport, these are nonviolent offenses that don't typically warrant excessive bail restrictions." His argument reflected standard legal advocacy despite his client's rejection of the proceedings, demonstrating his professional commitment to providing effective representation regardless of the circumstances. ADA Morales presented the state's position on bail conditions. "Your Honor, while these charges don't involve physical violence, the state has serious concerns about Ms. Duggar's pattern of deliberate disruptions at transportation facilities," she countered. As noted in the incident report, this appears to be at least her third similar incident at airports in recent months, suggesting an escalating pattern of behavior rather than an isolated event. Additionally, her sovereign citizen ideology specifically rejects the authority of courts and law enforcement, making her a significant flight risk despite her community ties. The prosecutor continued by proposing specific bail conditions. The state requests bail be set at $25,000, with specific conditions prohibiting Ms. Duggar from entering any airport, train station, or bus terminal while awaiting trial, she recommended. "We also request GPS monitoring given her statements rejecting the court's authority and the pending federal investigation. Additionally, given the presence of her minor child during this dangerous confrontation, we request that any unsupervised visitation be contingent upon Ms. Duggar not involving her child in sovereign citizen activities or confrontations with authorities." Judge Richardson considered both arguments before making her determination. The court sets bail at $20,000 with the following conditions. First, the defendant is prohibited from entering any airport, train station, bus terminal, or other transportation hub while awaiting trial. Second, she must surrender her passport and any sovereign citizen credentials or documents to the court. Third, she will be subject to GPS monitoring to ensure compliance with these restrictions. The judge paused to ensure her conditions were being recorded properly before addressing the child welfare aspects of the case. Regarding visitation with the minor child, this criminal court does not have jurisdiction over family court matters, but I will note that an emergency custody hearing is scheduled in family court this afternoon where these issues will be properly addressed. Brittany, who had been uncharacteristically quiet during the bail arguments, erupted again at the judge's ruling. "I do not consent to these unlawful restrictions on my God-given right to travel," she declared loudly. "You have no authority to demand my private property or restrict my movements. I am a free inhabitant of the land." Judge Richardson maintained her professional composure despite the outburst. "Ms. Duggar, your consent is not required for the court to set appropriate bail conditions based on the nature of the charges and the evidence presented," she explained firmly. "If you violate these conditions while awaiting trial, your bail will be revoked and you will remain in custody until trial." The judge then addressed the practical matters of the case going forward. The court schedules a preliminary hearing for July 8th at 10 a.m. Mr. Torres will continue as appointed counsel unless the defendant formally requests self-representation, in which case the court will conduct a Ferretta hearing to ensure she understands the consequences of that decision. With the formal matters concluded, Judge Richardson moved on to the next case on her busy calendar, and Brittany was escorted back to the holding area to begin the bail processing procedures. Outside the courtroom, Officer Meacham conferred briefly with Ada Morales about the case's next steps. "The bail conditions seem appropriate given her history and ideology," he observed. "The prohibition on entering transportation facilities directly addresses the pattern of deliberate disruptions." The prosecutor agreed, gathering her materials as they spoke. "The GPS monitoring will be crucial for enforcement, especially given her rejection of the court's authority," she noted. "I'll be coordinating with the FBI on the timing of potential federal charges, which would significantly change the complexity of the case." Officer Meacham inquired about the family court proceedings scheduled for that afternoon, concerned about Jacob's ongoing welfare given what he'd witnessed during the airport confrontation. "The family court has received copies of your incident report and the family services assessment," Ada Morales informed him. "Dr. Duggar's attorney has filed for an emergency modification of their custody arrangement based on yesterday's events and the pattern of involving the child in sovereign citizen confrontations. Given the documentation, I expect the family court will likely grant at least a temporary modification pending a full hearing." As they parted ways, Ada Morales expressed appreciation for Officer Meacham's thorough handling of the complex case. "Your detailed documentation of both the security disruption and the child welfare concerns will be valuable for both the criminal prosecution and the family court proceedings," she acknowledged. "These sovereign citizen cases can be particularly challenging because of their rejection of the legal system's fundamental premises." Officer Meacham nodded his agreement, having encountered the ideology multiple times throughout his career. "The challenge is maintaining professional law enforcement responses despite their deliberate provocations," he reflected, "especially when innocent bystanders like Jacob are caught in the middle." Returning to his duties at Denver International Airport, Officer Meacham found himself reflecting on the broader implications of the case beyond the immediate criminal charges. The deliberate targeting of transportation hubs by sovereign citizens represented a concerning trend that affected public safety, operational efficiency, and ultimately the traveling public who suffered delays and disruptions. The incident had demonstrated both the challenges of addressing sovereign citizen confrontations and the importance of coordinated responses between law enforcement, airport operations, family services, and the judicial system. Later that afternoon, Officer Meacham received notification that FBI agent Thomas Wilson had filed a federal criminal complaint against Brittany Duggar with the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Colorado. The federal charges included impersonation of a federal official under 18 U.S.C. 9112, interference with security screening personnel under 49 U.S.C. 465803, and false statements to federal officials under 18 U.S.C. 171. The federal case would proceed parallel to the state charges, with potential consolidation depending on how both cases developed through the judicial system. Officer Meacham also received a courtesy notification from Family Court Services regarding the emergency custody hearing. While specific details of family court proceedings remained confidential, he was informed that the court had granted Dr. Daniel Duggar temporary sole physical custody of Jacob pending a full hearing, with Brittany's visitation to be supervised and contingent upon her not exposing the child to sovereign citizen activities or confrontations with authorities. The family court had prioritized Jacob's emotional welfare and stability, given the documented pattern of his mother involving him in potentially traumatic confrontations. As his shift ended, and Officer Meacham completed his final documentation of the case, he reflected on the complex intersection of law enforcement, aviation security, mental health, and child welfare that had characterized the incident from beginning to end. What had started as a seemingly routine checkpoint disruption had revealed deeper issues of ideological extremism, family dysfunction, and the exploitation of a child for sovereign citizen performance art. The multi-agency response had addressed the immediate security concerns while also ensuring appropriate intervention for the innocent child caught in his mother's dangerous ideological theater. 3 months after the Denver International Airport incident, Officer Sean Meacham sat at his desk reviewing a case summary prepared by the District Attorney's Office regarding Brittany Duggar's prosecution. The case had evolved significantly since that June morning, with multiple legal proceedings across different jurisdictions addressing the various aspects of her actions and their consequences. The detailed report provided a comprehensive overview of how the criminal justice system, family court, and federal authorities had responded to the complex case involving sovereign citizen ideology, airport security disruption, and child welfare concerns. According to the summary, Brittany Duggar had eventually accepted a plea agreement on the state charges after the federal indictment significantly strengthened the prosecution's position. She pleaded guilty to interference with transportation facilities, with the resisting arrest and obstruction charges dismissed as part of the agreement. The plea deal included 18 months of supervised probation, mandatory mental health evaluation, and compliance with recommended treatment, 200 hours of community service, and restitution payments to the airlines affected by the security disruption. Most significantly, she was banned from all airports and transportation facilities for the duration of her probation and required to complete an FAA-approved aviation security education program. The federal case had proceeded separately, focusing on the more serious charges of impersonating a federal official and interfering with airport security operations. Agent Wilson's thorough investigation had connected Brittany's actions to a larger network of sovereign citizens targeting transportation infrastructure across multiple states. Her cooperation in providing information about the American Freedom Liberation Front that had sold her the fraudulent credentials and encouraged the airport confrontations had resulted in a reduced federal sentence of 8 months in a minimum security federal facility, to begin after completion of her state sentence requirements. Perhaps the most significant long-term consequence had come through family court, where Dr. Daniel Duggar had been awarded primary physical custody of Jacob with major decision-making authority regarding his education, health care, and religious upbringing. Brittany's visitation rights had been structured to explicitly prohibit exposing Jacob to sovereign citizen ideology, activities, or confrontations with authorities. The family court had ordered Brittany to complete both parenting classes and specialized counseling, addressing the emotional impact of her actions on her son before progressing from supervised to unsupervised visitation. Officer Meacham was particularly interested in the section of the report detailing the broader investigation into the American Freedom Liberation Front that had been selling fraudulent credentials and encouraging confrontations at transportation facilities. The FBI had executed search warrants at the group's headquarters in Nevada, seizing computers, financial records, and thousands of fraudulent documents similar to those Brittany had presented at the Denver airport. Financial investigations had revealed the organization had collected over $2.3 million from followers purchasing worthless immunity certificates and private attorney general credentials over the past 3 years. The report also included details about the child welfare aspects of the case that had been of particular concern to Officer Meacham throughout the incident. Jacob had been receiving regular therapy to process the emotional impact of witnessing his mother's arrest and the broader pattern of being involved in sovereign citizen confrontations. The therapist's assessment included in the family court proceedings had documented the psychological harm caused by repeatedly exposing the child to confrontational situations and ideological indoctrination that created conflict with his educational environment and social development. After finishing the case summary, Officer Meacham added it to the department's training materials for handling sovereign citizen encounters, recognizing its value as a comprehensive case study. Denver International Airport had subsequently implemented enhanced training for all security personnel on recognizing and responding to sovereign citizen tactics, using lessons learned from the June incident to improve protocols and coordination between TSA, airport police, and operations staff. The training emphasized de-escalation techniques, recognition of fraudulent documents, and appropriate responses to protect both operational security and the welfare of any children present during such confrontations. Airport Security Director Raymond Chen had invited Officer Meacham to contribute to the development of these training materials, recognizing the value of his frontline experience during the incident. Your handling of the situation balanced security requirements with child welfare concerns in a way that provides an excellent model for future responses, Director Chen had noted during their collaboration. The coordination between airport police, TSA, family services, and federal authorities demonstrated the multifaceted approach these complex situations require. The Transportation Security Administration had also implemented national-level policy changes in response to the increasing pattern of sovereign citizen disruptions at security checkpoints. New protocols specifically addressed fraudulent immunity certificates and private attorney general credentials, providing screeners with clear guidance on recognizing these documents and immediately engaging supervisory staff and law enforcement rather than becoming entangled in pseudo-legal arguments. The Denver incident had become a case study in TSA's national training program, with Officer Meacham's body cam footage used to demonstrate effective professional responses to sovereign citizen tactics. On a personal level, the case had reinforced Officer Meacham's commitment to child welfare protection within his law enforcement role. The image of 9-year-old Jacob sitting on the floor of the security checkpoint, headphones on and tablet in hand, trying to disconnect from his mother's theatrical confrontation, had stayed with him throughout the legal proceedings. Children caught in the ideological battles of their parents represented a particularly vulnerable population requiring special consideration from responding officers, a principle Officer Meacham had incorporated into departmental training he now conducted for new airport police officers. 6 months after the incident, Officer Meacham received an unexpected email from Dr. Daniel Duggar, updating him on Jacob's progress and expressing gratitude for the professional handling of a difficult situation. Jacob has been doing well in therapy and has shown significant improvement in his emotional regulation and security, the email read in part. His therapist believes that seeing authority figures respond calmly and professionally despite his mother's provocations was actually beneficial in counteracting some of the negative messaging he had received about law enforcement. He specifically mentioned the nice officer who talked to me at the airport in several therapy sessions. The message continued with encouraging news about Jacob's ongoing recovery and adaptation. He's thriving in his school environment now without the constant disruptions and sovereign citizen education that was creating conflicts with teachers and peers. While the situation with his mother remains complex, the structured visitation and prohibition on exposing him to sovereign citizen activities has created a more stable environment for him to process these experiences and develop a healthier understanding of civic relationships. I wanted you to know that your professional handling of a volatile situation made a positive difference in a child's life trajectory. The personal update provided a meaningful conclusion to a case that had demonstrated both the challenges of addressing sovereign citizen disruptions and the importance of considering the welfare of children caught in these ideological confrontations. While the criminal justice system had addressed the immediate security violations and broader pattern of fraudulent activities, the most significant long-term impact may have been the intervention that protected a child from continuing psychological harm and provided a path toward healthier development. As Denver International Airport returned to normal operations in the months following the incident, the systematic improvements implemented in response to the case represented the positive institutional learning that could emerge from even the most challenging law enforcement encounters. Enhanced coordination between agencies, improved recognition of sovereign citizen tactics, and greater awareness of child welfare considerations during security incidents had strengthened the airport's overall security posture, while better protecting vulnerable individuals caught in these confrontations. For Officer Sean Meacham, the case had reinforced the core principles that had guided his 12 years in airport law enforcement. Maintain professional composure regardless of provocation, prioritize both security requirements and human welfare, and recognize that behind the immediate incident often lie deeper issues requiring thoughtful, systemic responses. As he closed the case file and returned to his regular patrol duties, he carried with him both the lessons learned from the complex encounter and the knowledge that his professional handling of a volatile situation had contributed to positive outcomes across multiple dimensions, from airport security protocols to the welfare of a child caught in an ideological battlefield not of his making. The Brittany Duggar case ultimately demonstrated the complex interplay between security requirements, legal systems, mental health considerations, and child welfare that characterize modern law enforcement challenges. What began as a security checkpoint disruption had revealed layers of sovereign citizen networks, ideological exploitation, and family dysfunction requiring coordinated responses across multiple agencies and jurisdictions. The resolution had addressed not just the immediate security violation, but the broader patterns of behavior that had created risk for both transportation systems and a vulnerable child, reflecting the multifaceted nature of contemporary public safety challenges. As Denver International Airport continued its essential role connecting travelers across the country and around the world, the systems and personnel responsible for maintaining its security had emerged from the incident with improved capabilities for addressing similar challenges in the future. The sovereign citizen movement's targeting of transportation infrastructure would likely continue, but the lessons learned from the June 2022 confrontation had strengthened the institutional capacity to respond effectively, while protecting both operational security and human welfare, particularly for the most vulnerable individuals caught in these ideological performances. In the end, the case demonstrated that effective law enforcement in complex modern environments requires more than just enforcing rules and regulations. It demands understanding the human factors, ideological currents, and vulnerability considerations that shape contemporary public safety challenges. Officer Sean Meacham's professional handling of the Denver International Airport incident exemplified this comprehensive approach to law enforcement, balancing security requirements with human welfare considerations to achieve the best possible outcomes from a volatile and potentially dangerous confrontation. The systems and procedures improved in response to the incident would continue protecting travelers long after the specific case had concluded, a lasting positive legacy from a challenging enforcement situation.